Today we're going to talk about Dragon Dice, and just to give you a little bit of history about Dragon Dice has actually been around since the mid-90s. It's a tactical dice game. To me, it's real similar to a tactical miniature game, except obviously there's no miniatures. There's dice, and the dice are the miniatures. And as you know, we're called That's How We Roll, and we like dice games, so it works out really well. It's been around the mid-90s. TSR used to own it, which later became Wizards of the Coast, which nobody here likes. But SFR bought it in the early 2000s, actually when it was on its way to a German landfill. They put together a bunch of money and bought it, and they've been slowly but surely releasing new units and dice, and like this year they're releasing the 5th monsters for the goblins and the dwarves, so we're actually pretty excited about that. So anyway, we're gonna kind of give you a pretty detailed overview of Dragon Dice, because we know there's nothing else out there that's detailed for it, and it's a game we really enjoy. So I hope you guys enjoy these series of videos we got coming for you.
So what we have here is none other than an actual set of Dragon Dice. They're 12-sided, and as you'll notice on them, they match the pattern of an actual dragon. I noticed that a little later than others. But we'll go more in depth of all the different kinds of dragons and what they can do.
Here we have 6-sided dice, ranges from 1 to 4 points again. The 3-pointers, 3 and 4 pointers all have special action icons like that, which we'll talk about later. You got common, uncommon, rare, and champion. That is just the unit called. It's not about how hard it is to find. Here we have the 10-sided dice. This is a monster, which is 4 health worth of units. This is an artifact, which is a 10-sided item pretty much, and it has to be carried by a unit with that color. So here we got items. They range from a 1-pointer to a 4-pointer. The gold, this is a gold medallion, which are all 4-pointers, and that can be carried by anyone. These here from 1 to 3, they have to be colored or carried by a unit that has that color. And we'll talk about colors once we start talking about races. Here we have terrains. You got your major terrain and your minor terrain. They are both 8-sided die, and we'll talk about terrains at a later date, more in depth.
So earlier we talked about the 8-siders are terrain dice, and Dragon Dice is all about terrains. And the whole object of Dragon Dice is actually to capture 2 of these terrains. In a 2-player game, there will be 3 terrains total. And in a multiplayer game, there's more, but we'll talk about that later. As you notice, every terrain has 2 colors, and we'll talk about that more later. Right now I'm just going to talk to you about the 8 faces. Now the object of Dragon Dice is to either A, kill all your opponent's dice or units, or B, work your way up to an 8th face on these terrains. As you'll notice, they go from 1 to 8, obviously, because they're 8-sided dice, but every number's got a different icon. There's a magic icon, a missile icon, and a melee icon. And when we talk about how to play Dragon Dice, we'll get more details about that. But there's 8 different types of 8 faces currently in the game, and there are white ones and there are gold ones, and I'll talk about the white ones first. This first one is a tower. In Dragon Dice, when you make a missile action, this would be a missile here. When you make a missile action, you're allowed to shoot either the same terrain you're currently at or 1 terrain away. What a tower allows you to do is shoot missiles anywhere you want on the board. This one is a standing stone. And the 8th face standing stone does is it lets you cast the color of magic that the terrain currently is. And we talk about more about magic that'll make a lot more sense. But basically, if I am a dwarf here, I have red and gold magic. But if I capture an 8th face here, this is a blue and green terrain, I'd be allowed to cast blue and green magic. Next one is the city. What a city does is it lets you either resurrect a 1-point unit or promote a unit. What I mean by promote is if I have this guy dead, let's say he's a 4-point unit. As we mentioned earlier, monsters are 4-point units. And let's say he's dead and I have this 3-point unit at my city. What I can do is I can, even though you can't see him, now you can see him. Let's say I have this 3-point guy in my city. What I can do is I can exchange him with this guy in my dead to promote, which is essentially I'm gaining 1 hit point back. The last normal terrain, these white outlines, is called a temple. A temple does 2 things. First thing it does is it blocks black magic. So while you have a temple, no black magic can affect your army or the terrain you're currently at. It's really strong against death magic. Units like lava elves, undead, and we'll talk more about those later. And also what it does is you can choose an opponent and you force the opponent to bury a unit. And why burying is such a huge deal in Dragon Dice, because currently there's only one way, I believe, to get things out of the buried. No, that's not buried. That's
buried
dead.
yet.
Ignore the troll. Currently, there's only one way to remove units from the buried area in Dragon Dice. So once your unit's buried, it's pretty much out for the game. So temples are pretty powerful. Now, I'm just going to move those to a side and kind of focus in on these gold ones. About 2 or 3 years ago, SFR released these a battlefield expansion which featured these terrains here. And what the terrains are, these gold piped ones, you can only bring as your frontier, and we'll talk about that more when we talk about the rules of the game. But right here you have a grove. This little Toronto maple leaf Canada looking thing is a grove. And what that does is it does 2 things. It does not allow you to double magic, because normally if you match colors on the dice, like this dwarf matches both the colors here. If he rolled his face, he could double magic. This does not allow you to do that. Once again, we'll go over that more in detail later. This is a Dragon's Lair. Dragon's Lair does, it allows you to summon a dragon of that color to any terrain you wish. So if I had a red dragon in my summoning pool, which you guys have no idea what that is, but you will later, once again, I could bring this dragon automatically because he's red and he matches one of the colors here. This castle, what the castle does is really simple. Is these previous 4 terrains I just showed you, it lets you pick one of those, turns the castle into one of those. So it's one of those terrains where, you know, I'm not sure what I'm going to run into. I'd like to be prepared for anything. So the castle is kind of nice because it's very versatile. And last but not least, we have the Vortex. It's one of my favorite 8th phase terrains. When you have a Vortex terrain, you can re-roll 1 dice before it's finalized. And so that comes in pretty handy if you whiff on your roll or whatnot and you want a little bit better roll. And then one more thing I want to talk about real quick are these minor terrains. These are minor terrains, and we mentioned those earlier. And what a minor terrain does is your army, when it wins a maneuver attempt, which you have no idea what that is, but we'll talk about that later. When it wins a maneuver attempt, it's allowed to bring in a minor terrain to assist them. And then when that comes in, you roll it, and whatever you roll, so let's say I roll a melee action, I'm allowed to take a melee action, even if this terrain says I can't. So that's pretty nice.
So here we have a number of 8-sided terrains. And they're all different colors, usually in combinations of 2. And some of the special terrains will have different colored faces in terms of the actual numbers and symbols. So first we're going to cover Wasteland, which is red and blue. And this has the most melee faces of the normal terrains. Phelan is next, and that has green and red. And that is tied for the most magic faces of any normal terrain. Coastland terrain is blue and green, and it has the most missile faces of normal terrains. After that is Highland. Highland is red and gold. It's tied for the most magic faces of normal terrains. Swampland is green and gold, which has 2 magic, 2 missile, and 3 melee, so it's quite a bit more balanced. Flatland is blue and gold. It has 1 magic, 3 missile, 3 melee. So of all the normal terrains that were covered, all the dice of the same grouping, or same color I should say, will have the same layout in terms of numbers corresponding to what type of terrain, such as missile, magic, or melee. And on the tops of all the dice are the different types of 8th faces, which are temple, standing stone, city, and tower. And those all correspond to different abilities, which we'll cover. So all of the normal terrain types, such as this coastland set, will all have the same distribution of faces in terms of magic, missile, and melee. And what's different between some of the dice is that the special terrains faces are dictated by the 8th face, and so depending on the abilities which we've discussed, they'll act differently.